Hey there, thanks for listening to Navigate, a podcast all about transition. I'm your host, Tim Austin, and my goal is to encourage and resource you so that you can navigate change with greater confidence and clarity. Transition is a place where everything seems uncertain and up for grabs, especially when accompanied by loss. And in this episode, we're going to have some real, raw conversation around grief and loss with my guests, Matt and Kari Perkins. But woven into their story is a message of hope that I know is going to encourage you. Matt and Kari met while going through counseling following the loss of their spouses. They married in 2017 and have a blended family of 7 kids. Together, they seek to inspire those impacted by loss to find the beauty in brokenness and take the next step forward. Matt has served in key ministry roles for nearly 30 years for influential churches across the United States, and their refreshing approach to the topic of grief and moving forward after loss is a needed resource in today's society. Matt and Kari are also the founders of Grief to Growth, a dynamic program which helps those impacted by loss move forward with purpose. So here we go with Matt and Kari Perkins, and thanks for listening in. Okay, Matt and Kari Perkins, it's so great to have you guys join me for this conversation today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to reconnect and be able to spend this time together. We're excited about it.
I recall going way back our years in Colorado on staff at the same church for a little while. Our time overlapped there in Aurora, Colorado. And we didn't get to know each other too well at that point. And then all these years have passed, and all these wanderings, this journey. I mean, it's taken me and my family all over the globe. It's taken you to different places, and here we are reconnecting after all these years. So it's fun. It's exciting.
That's awesome.
Good. Well, I would love for my listeners to hear a little bit of the backstory from you guys. Tell us a little bit about who you guys are and what you do, and maybe some of the context. What brought you to this place?
Yeah. Well, again, thanks, Tim, for the opportunity for us to be able to share with your listeners. And you talk about transition and coach people in transitions, and it seems like both of our lives have been one big transition that has continued in over the years. Going back to in Colorado, we were on staff and then moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin. Was there for about 12 years, then was in Orlando, Florida, and served most all of my, ministry life has been as a worship pastor. And, God had blessed me and my wife, Mary Beth, with 2 daughters, and we were serving in ministry and everything was going great. And then moved to Fresno, California in 2014. And it was one of those times that we knew God was leading us in a transition, even confirming that through our 2 daughters. But it wasn't something that we were, seeking out or anything. We were happy in ministry. We were part of a great church, and still felt that there was a need for this transition of, God was definitely leading us. Shortly after we moved here to Fresno, my wife, Mary Beth, we noticed some changes in her health and went in to go to the doctor and just establish care and get all of that going. And she was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And it was 2 days before Christmas. Here our first Christmas season here in Fresno at the church. So, you're dealing with transitions of a cross-country move, getting to know people, all of that. And then, here we are hit with this. And she went into aggressive treatment starting in the January of 15. And then, we had great treatment, great doctors, and God chose to heal her in a different way than what we had prayed. And in July of 2015, she passed away. And so that was the early part of our journey. Now, Kari, who's also walked through loss, but that was kind of a different side of that, both here in Fresno. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, my late husband and I were. He was on staff at a church across town from where we are in Fresno, and he was the children's pastor. So we served there for several years, and we have five boys. And one morning, Sunday morning, he was speaking to our adult service about our children's building that we were in the middle of building. And it was the first of 4 services, and he walked off the stage and collapsed, and ended up, they tried to help him, and he ended up passing away from a heart attack, which was out of the blue, no warning. And so that was a shock to our life, to our church community, family, where he, served several hundred children. And so that was just a huge impact for our family. And so that's what happened.
What was the span time between these 2 events and these 2 major losses for you guys?
Yeah. So Mary Beth passed away the end of July of 15, and then Eddie passed away on
November 22nd.
November 22nd. So we were just a few months apart. And, I didn't know their family. We were serving in different parts of the town and the community. But one of our staff members, it was, we were in service, and one of the staff members had just texted me. He was like, "Hey, do you know Eddie Crane over at North Point? He suddenly passed away." And it was on a Sunday morning. We were in church, and I remember even at that time of just going, "Oh my gosh," just here 2, significant churches in as far as their community impact and different things in this town, and both experiencing the loss of, staff members. And we actually met the following year because we were going to the same counselor. And so myself and my daughters were seeing a counselor, and Kari and the boys were also seeing that same counselor. And so we really connected based on kind of the bizarre nature of our lives and kind of our worlds. And Kari was involved in worship ministry there. And so we kind of just really were talking about, can you believe how
life and
how stupid our life is?
Yeah. So the conversations were kind of started out like that as you were getting to know each other.
Just realizing that we're, it was hard enough trying to walk through for ourselves and in ministry, but then with children and trying to figure out how to navigate being, that now a single parent all of a sudden to, children who are going through their own grief, and loss.
And so that was really, we had connected through that from that basis. And it was more just, we were talking and, through that process, I think for the first several times we were, meeting, we'd go have coffee. It was more both of us looking over our shoulder going, oh my gosh, somebody's going to look, they're going to think something weird, and you just,
because if somebody
pretty good chance in a community where you're part of 2 significant church communities and
being so public as far as just what Matt does, a lot of people know him when we go anywhere. And then for my family, it was just the public nature of what happened was all over the news and everything else. And so for both of us, wherever we went, someone, we always ran into someone, whether they knew him or I or both or whatever.
And that was even part of conversations that I had with my daughters, when we first, I know it was one evening, my oldest daughter was saying, Dad, when we don't want you to put your life on hold for us to leave home and all of that. And, but, so part of that was asking, I'm like, I met your mom when I was 14. And so like, how does this work? This is new territory. Yeah. And a lot of it, she had just said, well, I think, we want to know if you're going to have coffee with someone or talk to someone, we want to know before that happens.
We don't want to hear from someone else in the church, right, or something.
And that was the whole thing is, if you go out, I don't want to find out from somebody else in the church that you were having coffee. And the other part of it is, I want to know there's people that could look at your life on a stage and think, oh, he's got a good life and I'd like to have a good life. And so I want to know what their motives are. Is it just, for whatever? And so, the girls we had a lot of open conversations about that and tried to navigate that transition in our lives as carefully and strategic as we could, because it's not just for us. There are 7 kids who are navigating loss in addition to ours. I know firsthand what it's like to walk through loss. My dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack when I was 14. So what the boys were walking through, I understood what was happening. And
so, Kari, were you having some of these same conversations with your kids at the same time, or?
A little different with boys.
Okay.
They're not as forthcoming to say anything like that.
Sure.
There wasn't really much to say about that. I don't think that was really in their mindset at that point, and mine either, really. Yeah. I mean, we were talking, it was, just conversation and just someone else who was around the same age who is walking through some of the same things. And it's like, it's difficult when you're going through that, but then when you go through that and you're in ministry and you're in a glass house, basically. And so having somebody else's take on that and going, okay, so I'm not really losing my mind. This is normal to feel this way for this specific thing or whatever. And so to think of it, we didn't have those conversations until we started talking more into that direction, is when I've had those conversations with the boys. The one thing that did help, which is really sad to say, but it really did help them to process better, was the fact that he had already walked through this on a personal level with his dad. And it was almost identical to not necessarily the situation, but I mean, he suddenly died, and that whole thing really impacted my kids to know that he wasn't going to try to replace their dad or try to, push their dad out of this, out of our lives. And now he's going to come in and be dad. He does father them. And they all are really well at accepting that. But it really did ease. I just from their own mouths saying that, that you walk through every age without a father, and like we will, and we are. And so we feel like that, it's not threatening to them.
Not threatening. It helped them with their acceptance. When I hear you guys talking and sharing your stories, it's just one thing that stands out. It's all the parallels, in your stories, ministry, family, timing of all of this, just your experience as a kid, losing your father, and how that was was very much in very, so similar to what they were going through. What were you doing when you're having these conversations? Were you just going like, isn't this weird, or what?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And part of that was, I would have different conversations. My mom remarried when I was in high school. And so I'd walk through that process as well. He was a lot older than my mom, and I was the youngest of 6 kids, and I was the only one at home. But we have 5 boys and a girl, and my siblings, and so there were a lot of parallels, even in my mom and myself in our lives. And when she was around the same age when my dad died as I was when Mary Beth passed away, and all of these, and I've talked about, that when we've talked in different areas, is I didn't really know per se, you don't read ahead of time a manual on what you're going to walk through and how to respond. But the only thing that I had to lean on was my mom modeled for me walking through loss in the loss of my dad and her husband. And so when we got to that point, my daughters were talking to me of going, Dad, we have like stood on this scripture of Psalm 112:7. They have no fear of bad news. They confidently trust the Lord to care for them. We have had that. We've got it on our fireplace. We've got it in all these areas. And we've stood on this scripture. And now this is what's happening. Like, how do we know God's going to care for us when he's not even answering our prayers and what we're asking for? And I think for that moment, it's responding to them of going, one, I know that he will care for us. And I know that because of firsthand experience. I've walked through this, and God, even though you still walk through difficult times, you walk through tough times, that the answers that you pray for aren't always the answers that come. But you can still trust God, knowing that he has brought us this far. He brought me this far in my life, the things that I've been able to walk through. And even though there's been multiple losses in different forms, that they don't all look the same, whether it's, careers and relationships, or miscarriages, loss of parents, in-laws. We have so many different labels that make up what can be classified as loss. But the bottom line is, when we trust God with everything that we have, that's all we have to hold on to. If we resist that, then what are we left with? And so I think it's important for not only in our lives personally, the lives of those who are listening right now and people that are connected to your ministry and your coaching, is that your loss may look different than ours, but that doesn't mean that you can't make it, that you can still navigate transition. You can still walk through things, and life may look different than what you had thought it would, but it doesn't mean that God, his character has changed just because he didn't answer it the way you wanted.
Good word. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit. It's one thing to walk through loss and grief personally, which you both have done, and multiple levels and times. But it's another thing to actually let that experience form and shape you, right?
Yeah.
And in a way that not only forms and shapes you and develops you, but also births in you something of a desire to want to help others. So how did that come about?
Well, I think it was some of the bizarre nature of our lives. And not only, when we were blending, I mentioned about it wasn't just us that was experiencing loss, but also our kids. And then we also noticed that there are friends and families with late spouses and all of these things that they were navigating this process as well. And I think when people would reach out, when you are open and transparent with what you're walking through, doesn't mean that you have to throw out all, your dirty laundry on social media or any of that, but just living life. People are watching whether you think they are or not. And I think if you're open with people and honest and saying, man, I haven't navigated this perfect. I don't have all the answers, but I do know that you can make it. And when you are expressing that to people, it's like they turn around and go, okay, I want to hear what you have to say. We aren't looking for.
Yeah, I think too, to add to that is when for me personally, and I know for you as well, but for me, walking through the loss of Eddie, devastating as it is, and trying to navigate through that, and then all the ministry, within ministry too, not just in ministry, but because we had children and families in our ministry, the children's ministry, they were navigating, through the loss of their pastor, for these kids. And it impacted me to see that not only is my family grieving and we're, it was awful for us. I looked beyond that to see that not only were our extended family, our friends who are very close to us, but then the families of these, and these children were just devastated. And it was a shock to them as well, and life-changing for a lot of them, and talking with them. But for me personally, I just hate the fact that people have to walk through this and don't really know what to do. Where can I go? What do I do? And that's kind of the same things when we talk to people in our class, and just people who reach out, and you come in contact with someone who's lost someone or had a significant loss. It's like people run away from that. They don't know how to talk about grief. They're afraid to approach them because they don't know what to say to them. And I know that for firsthand what that feels like now. And so I want to be able to put tools in people's hands that they can, navigate through some of these feelings, and they'll just what comes at them.
So I'm so glad you guys, you're saying this, Kari, because I want my listeners, and I want word to get out that there is support, there is resources when you're going through grief and loss. And a lot of people just don't know that, or they want to escape, like you said. And so we're going to give, share that information. And as we wrap up our conversation a little bit later, how people can find you, learn more about you, and the resources that you guys do offer. What were some of your lowest points, and how did God meet you there?
Wow. There have been some, I even shared just recently, one of the times that I was getting ready in a morning, just getting ready to go into the office. And I remember just I sat down in our closet, and I was looking at things that Mary Beth had and trying to navigate, how do I be a good dad? And it was just crushing me seeing them walk through this process, because I knew what they were walking through, but I hadn't, in their life, I wasn't a girl that lost a mom. And so that was crushing to me, because as a father, you don't want your kids to hurt like that, and you wish you could take it away. And then sitting in the closet one day, I was looking around and going, are you serious, God? Like, this is what my life is? And I think in that point, God started showing to me, and it was actually through some music that, that was something that I held on to. Now, there were also some things walking through that process. It kind of changed, and there were certain music I could listen to. There's certain even worship songs that I knew that Mary Beth, we had in our house for those number of months in the hospital, then at home. We had playlists of, worship music that was going in. But in one of those moments, and I remember that time specifically, it was like God was showing me that my dreams and plans for your life didn't die along with Mary Beth, that I still have things for you to do. Now, it may look different, but there is still a plan for your life, that I still have a future for you. And it's hard for us to see when it's like, a part, you talk about, two become one. We both were married at 19. Kari and Eddie got married at 19. Me and Mary Beth got married at 19. We lived all of our married life in ministry, and that was our journey. But when you don't have that person with, it's like something is missing and you're just floundering a little bit. And I remember that point as being one of just saying, okay, God, I don't know what my life looks like moving forward. It's scary, it's unknown, it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to trust you with it. And all I can do is just have that same trust and knowing that you'll lead me to the next thing.
What about you, Kari?
Well, something that stands out as far as a low point at one point was the one day my son, who was 13, 14 at the time, we were at the house and he just said, hey, Mom, do you think you could back up? He's super quiet, and was one of the ones that just kind of sucked everything in. But he came and he asked me, Mom, do you think you could show me how to shave? I just wanted to, I don't really know how, and I've got this here. And I said, yeah, hang on just a second. And I took off to the bedroom, my bedroom, and I shut the door. And I just needed a minute to just get myself up off the ground, basically feeling, because it made me angry at first, because I thought I shouldn't be the one being asked to help him. And I know I had older boys, none of them were there at the time. And one, I felt angry that I shouldn't be the one having to do this. Second, I felt sad that he didn't have his dad to ask him that question like the other boys. And three, I felt like, okay, you got to do this. I have no clue what I'm doing. And, I've taught them to drive, some of them to drive. I've taught them other things, but I've never taught anyone how to shave their face. So I thought I can do this, but I can't do it without you, God. And it sounds so simple and so kind of, in my words, dumb, to be so kind of just upset about it and felt like it was a low point, but it really was, because there was more to it for me. It was a slap in the face that I was the only one there for them. And so I picked myself up and I went in there and I showed him how. No cuts. It was good. No bleeding. But I needed that moment. If you know me, I don't have, I explained that a little bit. Emotions are not my strongest point as far as being emotionally, just tears and those things. I'm just one that just picks up and just does it. And so that's something I was learning at the same time as everything else coming at me. And so I needed that minute for myself to say, come to God and go, okay, I got this, but I really need your help, because I just want to just crawl back in bed. And so I went in there and we did it. And but that was a pretty low point for me, just because I felt like I was just being hit with everything. But at the same time, God was also picked me back up and said, I've got you. Just trust me. I know what I'm doing. And I know that I want you to know that I love you more than anything, and that I have not left you. And that was something that he continually, showed me.
Thanks for sharing both those stories, because it just highlights how God meets us in the low points,
Yeah.
and teaches us and comforts us and encourages us and reminds us, right, that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Working with people in transition, and of course, transition often involves loss, big losses, not always, like we said, the death of a loved one. But nevertheless, there's loss there. And I'm sure you've heard it before, as I have many times, the phrase, it's important to grieve well.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking to someone who's grieving, that's hard to, what does that mean? And yeah, can you kind of unwrap that a little bit?
I think we started really as a point of going, okay, God, if we can help some people, just sharing with them, that one, you're not alone. And I think the grieving well, that phrase, yes, we all want to do well. Sometimes grieving well is making sure that you ate today, mm-hmm. that you took care of yourself, that you took a shower, that you went to bed, and then you got out of bed the next morning. Grieving well doesn't mean that you're some super griever. It means that you're just managing life with what you have today, that you take the next step. We, even when we were looking at the possibility of, okay, we're going to get married, and what do we want to do? And it became overwhelming at different times, because I'm looking at it going, okay, 7 kids, mm-hmm. a blended family of 7 kids. I don't know, do we have the capacity to pull this off? And there were so many things that were overwhelming. How do we didn't want to just get married and just walk away from all of the other ways that our lives were interweaved with Mary Beth's family, with Eddie's family, with both of our churches. And so there were things that we would look at, and it was like this picture that I got one day, and I've used it nearly every week. It comes up, or even just to ourselves, is, whether the show Amazing Race or a big scavenger hunt, back in the youth leader mm-hmm. days, that we would do the scavenger hunts, and you can't shortcut and try and anticipate what that clue is going to be without just going and getting the next one. And I think for us, grieving and relating that to grief is, you can't worry about 5 steps down the road. You just have to take the next one. And sometimes that next one is, okay, I've got to manage some details, and I've got to, whether it's sign some papers or documents, whether it's, this is what has to be handled. We were talking with someone, out of this process, we have developed a program that is really it's a grief resource, but it really is something to help people put a personal development plan together of how to take the next step and what that looks like, and through all of the things that they do. But there was a lady that had recently, it was a traumatic experience in losing her spouse. Through that process, she had also was losing the home that they had worked hard to get. And so there were a lot of things involved in that. And she was just visibly shaking during that class. And she was like, I don't know. I have to sell these things. I have to downsize, and I have to get rid of things. Some people talk about how they'll hold on to things and not be able to let them go. Well, what happens when you've not only lost a person, but now you're forced to get rid of some of those memories and things that are there? And so we were just talking with her, and she goes, we were going to have a sale, and I put things out, and I caught myself that I would put things out, and then I would go back later and I would pick things up and I would take them back into the house. And so we just talked about, hey, have you ever thought this is one of the things that we do every so often? You take a picture of something and then you hold on to that picture, and Kari had mentioned to her, she goes, maybe you could put that in a scrapbook or something. And she just started sobbing. She goes, that's what I'm going to do. That's what we did together. My husband and I, we used to scrapbook. Now I can do this. And it wasn't,
she left saying, I'm going to go home and take pictures, and the next week she came back and she was still upset about the fact that she still has to get, forced to get rid of stuff and downsize.
But she was sharing with somebody else in the class of going, you know what, you can take pictures. And it's not always about these revolutionary things. There's other people that can say what we say. I think if you are vulnerable and open with people and just saying, I don't got all my crap figured out either, but I just take the next step. And in a simple thing of, hey, here's a tool that we've used, maybe it'll work for you. And I think people will latch onto that and just go, oh, if you'll give me some practical advice and I know that you really care and want to help me, that's what people are looking for. They just want to know that they're not alone and somebody's not going to think that they're stupid because they're grieving and holding on to things. The biggest thing that we hear from people is walking away going, I think I feel better knowing that, one, I'm not alone, and that what I'm walking through is normal. Those two things, any of those, did I get 5 PhDs to get that stuff? No. I just told them, here's what I'm walking through, and you can do this. Take the next step. And that's one of the greatest needs that we have as people, just to know that they have hope and that we're behind them and for them. Keep walking.
Yeah, I love that. So grieving this whole area of grieving well, thank you for sharing that, because I think that really help us put that in perspective. What does that mean? Like you said, take the next step. And it helps us have realistic expectations in times of loss, right? No, I don't need to be expected. I need to maybe lower my expectations to reality here. What is possible? What am I able to do at this time? Then there's this whole area of remembering. And I'm fascinated by memory, and because how it really shapes our identity. I think memory informs our identity. And I walk through as I coach people through transition. There's always that providing space for debriefing and processing some of the past, celebrating some of the wins, grieving some of those losses, just unpacking some of that. And I guess a phrase that I'm kind of considering and thinking through is, what does it look like to remember well? And, like you were saying, you're sitting there in your closet, remembering things. You're whatever you're remembering in time of loss and grief, what does it mean to remember well? How do you hold space for those memories and yet move on?
Yeah, I think those are great questions, and I love that concept and even that thought of what you're saying is the importance of remembering. For us, we have chose that we are going to fully embrace each other's lives, and so for us, it's important for us to have pictures. Actually, I'm in our office at the church, and I love this because people walk into my office that don't know our history and story, and they're looking around, and even over here they see like these two large areas of some frames, and I can usually see people's wheels turning because they see pictures of Kari and Eddie and the boys, and next to that is a picture of me and Mary Beth and the girls. And then there's pictures of us together, and there's pictures of when Mary Beth was going through treatment and some work that I did with a cancer foundation. And those are one of the big things that when people talk about when they're moving forward into a new relationship, if they haven't had a lot of those early conversations, there's several different groups, online groups that we're both a part of. And one of the early things is that comes up in relationships is people talk about, said, well, I'm seeing this guy and this might be, something great. And I'm looking forward to this, but he gets offended because I have pictures of me and my late husband, or a guy that will say she gets all, insecure because I have a picture of my late wife. And I think those are things. Here's one. I knew that I married God has blessed me. Actually, I had a friend from college that had messaged me the other day, and he goes, Perkins, you outkicked your coverage with Mary Beth, but it looks like you did it again with Kari. And he was like, you're certainly blessed. And I am, and I know that. And, but just, I was out of town singing for an event, and it would have been Mary Beth's 50th birthday. And they sent me a picture. It was Kari and two girls that had Kari went and bought a birthday cake and some candles, and they were singing happy birthday to Mary Beth and celebrating her birthday. And that was, one of the things that I looked at and just go, thank you, God, that I can keep loving Mary Beth. Kari can keep loving Eddie. We go, and if we have time with all the other things going on with kids, that we go out for each other's anniversaries. Hey, happy anniversary. This would have been, you and Eddie's, X anniversary, and we've gone out for me and Mary Beth's anniversary. It's important with that because everything that I am leading up to that point when Kari and I got married, I am who I am because of the combined and collective experiences that I have. And so I don't want to get rid of those memories. It's important to embrace those. And even in the tough memories, it's important to embrace those and know, hey, that was a difficult moment in our lives, but I'm going to embrace it and everything that I can, because that's what makes me who I am today and allows me to move forward in the decisions and choices and memories that I make moving forward.
Good. Love that. Kari, anything around this whole area of memory and remembering well?
Probably the same thing. I mean, I just think it's nice to not have the pressure of feeling like I have to hide how I feel, or that I remember today was a significant day, for our family. prior to our family. But being able to celebrate those things, and they don't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be a big party. It doesn't have, sometimes it was just a subtle card, that just says, I mean, we've both done this, just happy anniversary, on those anniversary days or birthdays or whatever. And just a hug to let them know that, let him know that I was thinking about him today. I know it's difficult. And if I could change it, and she could be here, that would be the first thing I did, and that's just something that when I see other people wiping completely their past away from, what was, because they're afraid of their new relationship or however that works. And everyone navigates things differently. And I understand that, but we want to be able to give people the tools to be able to still embrace what was, but continue for what will be, and not feel threatened by what was, because that is a huge part of your life. It's a huge part of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and so being able to hold on to that.
And even now, we've had, even recently in the last few weeks and the last year, Kari's oldest son, they had a baby. So we had our first granddaughter last May. Then my oldest daughter, Brianna, just had a baby February 1st. And so we talk about, even in the excitement of each of us, because it's not her granddaughter and my grandson, these are our kids, and we are, this is how we are doing life together. Yes, there's some dynamics of how that came to be, but knowing that even in the excitement, you're always going into a big event, a life moment, or a holiday, and there's someone that isn't there that should be.
This is a bittersweet at times.
Yeah.
And so, I've talked about, even in a blog that I wrote, talking about my invisible friend named grief, and how it seems like they always show up at the special holidays, and they're there. It doesn't mean that it has to lay me out, but, we give space for each other, knowing, hey, Thanksgiving is potentially a difficult holiday because it was right around that time that Eddie passed away. And so there's times that you give each other space and know that, hey, it's not going to be there. It's still going to be there. So embrace life's experiences, embrace the hardships, but also celebrate the wins.
Yes. And because it's part of you, like you said, it's a part of you. It's who you are. Your experience and those memories around those experiences make up who we are. And to embrace that, like you guys are doing, is such a powerful testimony to the world. So thank you for what you guys do and how you're resourcing and supporting people who are going through grief and loss and transitioning through those hard moments and times and seasons. And so, wrapping up our conversation today, I'd love for our listeners to know more about how they can learn more about your ministry and your work you do, how they can find you, the different ways they can potentially be resourced by you and supported by you. So, tell us more.
Yes. So we have launched a program called Grief to Growth. And you can go to our website at grieftogrowth.org and find out more about the programs, as well as online courses that we have, and being able to resource through things that they can pick up. And it's about helping those who have been impacted by the loss of someone or something significant, and then helping them move forward with purpose. And really, that is our hope. So whether it's a in-person program where we have these events, or if it's something of going through an online course, then we connect through some Zoom connects and be able to resource people and have some check-ins. It's really about taking where you are. And what I've found is one, people don't know really where to go many times. And if they've been a part of certain functions, whether it's going through hospice or things like that, we have some hospice agencies that are just outstanding. And they provide programs. Sometimes it's painful for people to walk into those. Because there are, when we talk about memories, there are some memories they're not ready to address. And if they're looking at counseling, many times it's cost prohibitive for some people. And it's in this day and age and the need for mental health resources, counselors are, several weeks on a waiting list. And then you get there and you don't even know what to ask. And so we've just told people, hey, this is kind of like a triage. We're going to give you several weeks of information and material and be able to connect and give you some tools to develop on in your path forward on your journey. And then we don't replace counseling. We encourage you to go do that. We encourage you, seek coaching, those things. But once you get there, you may be equipped with some new tools to even know what to ask. And so that's what we've been wanting to do, is just help. There's a ton of other resources, but we want to just help you take where you are and experience growth along the journey.
Love that. And as a reminder too, for our listeners, I love what you say. I can't remember if it was on your website or where I saw this statement that you resource and help those impacted by the loss of someone or something significant. So doesn't have to necessarily be that you've lost a spouse or a family member. There's been a death in the family, or it can be the loss of a career, of a job. It can be the loss of a place. So many areas of loss that this could apply to. So just want to make that clear to folks listening that a great resource is whatever kind of loss you might be experiencing. So we will put that information in the show notes for our listeners so they can find you, they can have a resource there. And again, hey, thank you guys so much for joining me. I feel we could go on, and maybe we'll have to have another conversation here in the near future, but really appreciate you joining me on Navigate today.
Thank you so much. Again, it was our pleasure, and just love being able to connect and talk about what God's doing.
That's great to meet.
Likewise. Yes, thank you. All right. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks.
Walking through a season of loss can feel very isolating and lonely, but it doesn't have to be. We can have qualified, compassionate, competent, Spirit-led people come alongside of us to provide much-needed encouragement and support. So I want to encourage you to check out the show notes for this episode to learn more about connecting with Matt and Kari Perkins. As a coach, I absolutely love walking with my clients through loss and subsequent transitions that those losses trigger. Schedule a call with me at EncompassLifeCoaching.com to learn more about transitions coaching and the packages that I offer. And finally, moving a podcast forward means helping more listeners find us. And if you've enjoyed the content we are providing, you can subscribe so that you're sure to get in on the next episode. And can I encourage you, I'd really appreciate you taking a moment to give us a quick review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform that you use. That's a wrap for this episode of Navigate. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.